Hello and welcome to, or back,
depending on your point of view,
to the podcast, which, if you are being welcomed back to it, has a different name.
Mostly a different name.
We had talked about it in the last episode, which was 3 months ago.
So pretty recent.
Pretty recent, before life kind of exploded. And so this is Coddiwomple.
For the first official time.
It used to be Here Be Dragons, which we changed the name from for a couple of reasons. One was that I think there were 8 or 9 other podcasts out there called Here Be Dragons, and most of the time we spent discussing dragons was discussing that we did not discuss dragons on a show called Here Be Dragons.
So it seemed maybe like a new name was in order. We proposed Coddiwomple on the last episode we did, which I don't think we officially said it was renamed, but kind of we said we were renaming it. So this is the first official renamed episode of the show formerly known as Here Be Dragons.
And we are starting with a number 1 on this. So this is not episode 5 of Here Be Dragons. We have burned that down and started anew with Coddiwomple, which is this wonderful little Scrabble word we discovered that means
to travel purposefully towards a vague destination.
Which, frankly, is sort of a perfect word for encapsulating the life of a gig economy multimedia freelancer.
Yeah, that sounds somewhat familiar.
I don't really have any idea what we're doing or what's coming down the pipe or what skills will be necessary for the next iteration of media, but so far we're still dancing on the Sawblade and haven't
severed anything yet.
Anything non-vestigial, at least.
Right, yeah.
There. We are coming at you from the Barefoot Media office in Federal Way, Washington.
Romantic, beautiful Federal Way.
Which is this sort of bulb of southwestern King County. King County is the wealthiest of the counties in Washington. It's the one that has Seattle and the Microsoft campus and all the stuff you see on the postcards, and is just over the county line from Pierce County, which is glaring at King County and sharpening its knives.
Right. I think that's an appropriate description. There's some fist shaking.
Fist shaking there, yeah. A lot of, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Think that's a nice way to put it.
Nice way to put it. So here we are. It is March of... It's almost April, if you can believe that.
Dear God.
Yes. We... Personally, at least, we kind of stumbled right out of the gates as 2018 had to get in one final shot before the end of the year, which is kind of why I've been in bunker mode for the last 90 days or so. We're starting to come out of that. And
good.
Glad that you're here for this, because at the very least, if I have to prescribe and schedule time for conversation with a friend, at least I can still make it something soulless and business related.
Good. Yes. That's absolutely what you want in a friendship. Is
baby steps.
Is as soulless as possible.
Yes.
That's my philosophy.
So a bit of what we do here. If you know of us, it's probably because you're aware of the movies or the web shows or the live shows, either on Twitch or at conventions now.
Yeah. For the Gamers movies, the Gamers live improv shows, Masters of the Metaverse. There's tons of... I'm not even probably going through half of it here.
I forget some of the stuff that we do just because we've been doing this for 20 years now.
Oh, duh, Journey Quest. Come on.
Right, there's that one. Yes.
Kind of the big one we're working on right now?
The last thing I directed, actually, was, which was an odd experience, just metaphorically shaking the dust off, coming back to direct 3.5 in January. Odd for a number of reasons. One was because we wound up shooting at my old middle school.
That's right,
in Tacoma, Annie Wright Seminary, which is this lovely 19th century boarding school that has was for girls in its earliest stages, and just when I was in middle school had just opened to being co-ed through 8th grade. So I went there, like when I was a 6th grader, the first generation of Annie Wright boys were 8th graders. Like it was within those first 3 years. They're actually building an upper school for the boys now.
That's what I hear, that they're going to now be all the way through 12 boys and girls.
And so for Journey Quest 3.5, which is a slice of the season 4 season that we would have had to cut otherwise, the storylines contained within, just due to scope and budgetary constraints. We were able to get it done and film it at a pretty high production value there.
Right on.
Which was pretty neat. It was funny to go back because it's a small community that's there, and some of the teachers who I remember from when I was, again, 12 to 14 years old are still there.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I was standing in the lobby near the famous senior steps there, where we actually see one of the first shots of the 3.5 season when that's done. It's the Bard students coming down the stairs.
Okay.
And as we were meeting with Tony Becerra and Sam Graydon, Montana Trippett, and I, we were doing a tech scout for, I saw one of my teachers, who's an administrator, come out of the office, and she just looked at me and said, "Matthew." And immediately I said, "Yes, ma'am," because I was 12 again. And she reminded me of some terrible English class pun I'd made during the first Bush administration, and said, "Do you remember that?" I'm like, "Yes." I never forget a terrible grading pun.
But she apparently, or he
apparently did.
He or she
She
remembered
apparently
it.
did. And the thing is,
I guess you called her ma'am. That would make
I
it
did.
she. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. The thing that was odd, though, is even though now I have been an adult twice as long as I was old when I met her, I still can't call her by her given name. It's the mental block will not allow that.
No, I don't think of any of my teachers in terms of their first name. Like, a lot of them, I couldn't even tell you what their first name was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you always have that. It's sort of how you always sort of see your parents as being some kind of authority. Even as you get older, you realize your parents might not be that much of an authority on just about anything, except, they're given areas of expertise where perhaps they were employed. Mm-hmm. You still sort of look to them as someone who knows something you don't.
Yes, I would say that. And with the teacher's case, someone who could get you into phenomenal trouble with those people if they report what you actually were doing.
Right.
So, yes, what are you working on these days? Is there anything you would like to promote?
What am I working on? What would I like to promote? Well, working on, most recently, my dad is retiring this coming weekend. So they're having a big retirement party with his church, and so I spent some time writing a little speech for that.
I remember your speeches.
Yeah.
Your best man speeches, your infamous speeches.
Yeah,
is this also a roast?
It's semi a roast, and it's toned down because it's a church audience. And I mean, it's my dad's church audience. It's not a church audience that we have in common. So I'm going a little kind of softball on this one. But yeah, it's a little bit like that. So it's the same basic format, just much shorter. But the other thing I am working on right now, there are actually two things that kind of go together. One of them is I am in the early stages of beginning to launch a new business that has two different functions. One of them is, and this is the part that's going to be slower to get up and running, I think, will be I'm going to start selling GMing for hire services, or DM for hire services. So basically, I figure we have a whole bunch of nerds like me in this area of the country.
That we do.
And a lot of them are employed by Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. So they might have less time to plan and organize campaigns, but still the desire to do so. And if they have, they're making way more than I am, they might say, you know what, it's worth it to me to hire someone to make sure that I get to do this every month.
A professional GM.
Yeah, exactly.
A GM for hire.
Yeah, exactly. So it turns out DM for hire is taken as a website, so I didn't go with that. Right now the working name is Your Personal DM. Mm-hmm. So the other thing I'm working on, though, is a new show for Zoe, that I will probably be co-producing with Zoe.
Okay.
We don't have everything worked out yet, but verbally we've talked about how that's what we're going to be doing.
Cool.
And that will be called Dungeons and Flagons. And that show will be partially a promotion for the professional DM thing, but it's meant really to be a show that stands on its own regardless of what happens with that. It's 15 to 20 minutes where I talk about gaming either generally or because 5e, 5th edition for D&D is the new hotness right now, specifically about that. And then at the very end, I find some ludicrous reason to recommend a beer based on the topic that I just discussed. So it's Dungeons and Flagons.
Dungeons and Flagons. And you are a beer aficionado, so I think you will...
I don't know if I'd go so far as to call myself aficionado. I'll say enthusiast.
Enthusiast would be a good one there. And there's plenty of research you can do
that
into
is
the subject.
Already one of my favorite parts of this gig. So that's what I've got in the hopper. It's been taking up most of my time that's not looking for work. What have you been working on?
What have I been working on? A lot of it has been, again, in that bunker mode bit on the family. We're doing better. Thank you for everyone who's checked in on that. Not really something I'm going to be talking about publicly. Mm-hmm. But. That's a conjunction that usually means I'm going to contradict or amend what I just said. Sometimes I tack it on because I feel like I need to keep talking, like I haven't made the point after the first clause. I'm not going to be talking about it. Period.
There we go.
All right.
So the but was a clarification for the lack of but, which is what a skinny guy like me has.
But has been in short supply.
Yes.
So what am I working on? I am still working on the new novel, The Fatal Frontier.
Excellent.
I'm about 6 chapters into that, and it's actually... I thought I would be farther along in the overall story by now. I'm still just around... I think we just finished setting the table, and now the sparks are beginning to fly as things are starting to lurch, as the train is starting to fall off the tracks.
Okay.
As it were. I thought I would be farther into the, I guess it's not a spoiler to say, the dungeon delve portion of it by now, but that will be soon. It's a big section I'm looking forward to. So we're nearing about the end of the first, I'd say, third of the piece. There. Looking forward to getting into the next bit as things shift. I'm also working fervently now on the Farther Roll World Bible, which was the campaign guide, I guess we could call it, world guide that was part of the Journey Quest 3.5 campaign.
Oh, yes.
And as part of the backer kit afterwards, there was a stretch goal unlocked to unlock another additional 150 pages.
Oh.
Which is at least 40,000 words more, so great.
Oh, is that all?
At the same time, oh dear.
Yeah.
So I've been working on that very heavily, and that one's been a really fulfilling and fun and scary project in a way, because I finally have to put down on paper all the stuff that's been nebulous or hinted at or that I've been figuring out as I've been going for the other projects that borrow from and touch in the world. It's coming in an order that I did not expect as well. Like I'm not starting with section 1 and going through it, because there are some sections that can't really be written until other sections are, as they inform them so heavily.
Right.
And all writing is a process of discovery. So as I'm putting together, say, like the history of the different peoples of Farther Roll, that informs the history, which informs the epics, which informs the pantheon, which informs the nature of the Hopjockey universe. And so there's a lot of connective threads that I want to explore, and try not to fall down too many rabbit holes and miss the deadline, because the goal is to have this out and ready and for after campaign sales by Gen Con this year.
So make sure I understand, you're starting with kind of a very large but very general macro view, and then moving granular and working back up to that overall view, because kind of a lot of the stuff you need in the grand view of the world needs some of that granular stuff to be defined.
It does need some of that granular stuff to be defined, and part of it is starting from what we've already established, and then also trying to write a comprehensive history of the world without giving away major spoilers for stuff that we have not yet to release, and also to try to hit what the world has been so far, which is something that is deceptively generic at the beginning. It's like it hits so many of the Farther Roll as the world and the setting for the gamers, and Journey Quest and parts of Hopjockey was always meant to be very familiar, almost banal in a way, so that when we do subvert things and twist the tropes and change things, it seems it has more of an impact that way, and it's more meaningful, which has been fun. I've been spending the last couple of weeks on the various peoples of Fartherall, races, species, and whatnot, where they came from, how physiologically different they are. And a lot of it is just, stuff that you might expect, and a lot of it is, and here I am being very vague, I think pretty interesting and pretty unique on a take of who is related to who from the same original strains of DNA and how they manifest as the ages change.
All right.
Decidedly vague, I think.
Yeah, I think it's vague while still giving an idea of what's going on.
All right. And other final thing going on, I optioned the movie rights to my first book.
Oh, yeah. Who'd you option them to?
Pwned to Kairos Productions in Seattle.
Yes. Hey.
Corey
Moore's outfit.
Yes, indeed. Corey Moore's outfit. And so, the screenplay I wrote that I turned into a novel has then been optioned to be turned into a screenplay. All right. But it would be a vastly different movie than the one that I originally wrote.
Right.
So that's cool, and that's another thing that's on the docket, which is one of the reasons I'm sprinting through getting the World Bible done as soon as I can.
So does the option involve you converting it to a screenplay, or just the option for that company to convert it to a screenplay?
I do have the option of converting it into a screenplay. We're going to see about. We're going to get some meetings together, see just what the timeline might be, what the specs are for the project, and what is the vision? What can we get done here?
Right on.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. So what are you reading these days?
Well, I'm reading a fuck ton of gaming books. Mostly 5e, because I say that's the new hotness. And I'm doing that for my job. Well, the job I'm developing, the work the company I'm trying to start up here.
You have arrived.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's a lot to fit into my brain, but I also kind of like learning a new system if I'm interested in the general subject matter, which it turns out I am with gaming.
How broad a dive are you going into the rules?
I mean, I'm starting with anything for players to be like, okay, how do you experience this world from the view of a player? Because when I'm looking at running a system, I want to know what is it like on the other side of the table from the DM, because that's sort of where you have to go, okay, how do I make it interesting for the people who are approaching it from this direction? So that's usually where I start. I moved out to figuring out all the monsters, or at least all the stuff they have in large supply, what their idea of what those monsters is, what I decide I might want to change for this campaign, that or the other. I've started looking at when I as a DM, I've never really run a module before. But that's something I want to look at now, because especially, in the ideal that over the course of the next few years, I get to the point where I have multiple campaigns going on, doing individual large-scale preparation for each and every campaign and each and every session is going to start to become tougher. So what I want to do is make sure that I have the option to use modules, so that I can be like, okay, at least 50% of that prep is already done for me. Now I just have to tailor it to this group and what they've actually done in the setting.
Oh, and what's really neat about the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons is some of these modules, at least the scenarios of them, are as old as the system itself.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, what is the modern version or the new reboot of the Temple of Elemental Evil?
Right. Or Undermountain,
yes,
or
exactly.
Tomb of Annihilation, or just all these different settings. I started with the two I've reviewed so far were both sort of unique to 5th edition. And one was a Storm King's Thunder. It's all about giants and how they're interacting with the peoples of the continent. And the other one was Out of the Abyss, which all takes place in the Underdark. And there's some stuff in that campaign that I was reading and I was like, you know what? That is a really cool idea. Whether I ever run this campaign or not, I'm probably going to steal this shit for some campaign or another. Because some of the stuff is just like, I would never have thought of that, and it's such a cool idea.
How does the rule set of 5e compare? Since, I know you personally, we've been playing together since 2nd edition in college.
Yes.
How does it stack up against earlier systems?
It's closer to 3 than to 4.
Okay.
It's much closer to 3 than to 4. It takes some So 3, of course, could get so complex. There were so many different options, and you had to keep track of like all your different skills and how many ranks did you put into each one, and how did that qualify you for this prestige class that you have to take a prestige class, and then how many different classes did you have to take to optimize that prestige class to get, if you were really into like optimizing the character.
Right.
It's hard to make a character that totally sucks in 5e. Like, you can have a character that's not the most effective, but they're not gonna like sit there and suck out loud. You could make that in 3.5 compared to what other people could do.
True. Yes.
So I think it does that well. They started going for like bounded accuracy, where like, an orc in armor with a shield is just as tough to hit at first level as at 20th level, because there's the same amount of armor and they're just as dexterous.
Mm-hmm.
But then they kind of like, they made it semi-bounded accuracy, so you can kind of get better. You do get better, just not like say in a base attack progression 1 to 20, it's 2 to 6.
Oh. Okay.
Over the course of 20 levels. So, and then it's much more streamlined. It's much smoother. There's some people who are there are a lot of people I know who really liked, say, 3.5.
Yes.
And loved the complexity and the option to do anything with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a benefit that system had. You can do most of that with 5e in one way or another without having to get so rules heavy.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is on its face a strange question to ask about a game full of elves and wizards. But how does the rule system funnel into the realism of the gameplay? Like, does it feel more authentic? Does it feel more realistic? Or is it the situation where it's like, I can stand here and take 80 points of damage to the face and not drop, or have a depreciable decrease in my abilities?
Right. I haven't seen a version of D&D where that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you still have one of the sacred cows that they've kept with it is hit points.
Right.
Like, you have X amount of damage you can take. I'm starting to work on, as a DM, trying to find ways to make that a more realistic approach. Like, okay, instead of you hit him for 20 damage, it's your sword swings in a wide arc. You clip him on the arm. It shatters part of his armor. He's bleeding slightly, but he's having trouble using that arm now. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, if the fighter has 100 hit points and you did 20 to him just now, that's a significant damage, but he's still up and fighting. It's not like you got right through his armor and stabbed him through the heart, and he's still jumping at you with, all of his might. So I think the description in how that interacts works. But yeah, you still, at 1 hit point, you're generally fighting just as efficiently as at 100.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing the system doesn't reflect, which is like pretty much every other D&D system that I've run.
Cool.
So yeah, that's what I am reading. And that's probably way more detail than you ever wanted.
I asked.
You did. It's all your fault. And all of our listeners, you can blame Matt for that. Well, what are you reading then? I'm assuming it's not a load of gaming books?
Not so much, no. I've been doing a lot of reading over the last few months, starting with, I finished Michael Pollan's most recent book, How to Change Your Mind, What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence.
Hey, you've been reading a lot of psychedelic stuff for a while now.
I have. It's fascinating look into what actually happens in the brain when the different substances hit. How the reason why it was called acid in the 60s is because of what it dissolved. Senses of self, bonds, feelings of obligation to society, while at the same time reducing you to a sense of oneness with all things. Some have called it like a glimpse into the spirit realm, or a glimpse into the afterlife, or a revelation of your true self, or whatnot. Michael Pollan, of course, coming at this as a skeptic, was a really interesting. Interesting is such a milquetoast way to describe it, but to have his record of the different trips that he took, because he tried the psilocybin mushrooms, and he tried I think it was LSD, and also some of the toad-based.
Oh, really?
Ones where you don't actually lick it, but you I think it was a matter of you milk the toad by getting it to spit onto a mirror that you then scrape it when it dries up and smoke that, and that instantly drops you like one puff. You won't even remember exhaling, and you're gone.
Wow.
That the stuff is so powerful. I would recommend it. I want to reread it with a better sense of what's coming this time.
Yeah.
There was another book was More Than True: The Wisdom of Fairy Tales by Robert Bly.
Another one of your favorite authors.
One of my favorite authors, and it's his first novel. Well, not novel, sorry. His first work of non-poetry in a while that's been published. And it's a slim book and reads like poetry because that's what he's most known for, where he dissects 6 old fairy tales, specifically from modern point of view, and at the same time an archetypal sort of inborn point of view. What do these mean to us on an emotional and almost an instinctual level? Like, why do we use fairy tales as a means of communication, specifically to children? Why not just say, don't talk to strangers? Why is it instead the story of Little Red Riding Hood? It's a metaphor. The truths of them, the lessons become self-evident. You don't have to. You can wrap a lesson in narrative and have the child learn it in a way that's not didactic that way. I don't remember much of that one because I read it when we were on our magical island.
Oh.
And which is not a euphemism for anything. I mean, there. Also read a book by a novelist. It's his first work of nonfiction. Legion versus Phalanx: The Epic Struggle for Infantry Supremacy in the Ancient World by Myke.
Now that sounds interesting.
That's Myke, M-Y-K-E. He's the author of The Armored Saint and a number of other sort of military-themed fantasy novels, as he himself was a former defense contractor and a great Twitter personality. So he has a fighting man's point of view in his writing, and he writes his history as a novelist, and he's also an expert in the ancient world, specifically ancient warfare, the history of Greece, the Peloponnesian Wars, and that such. And he introduces this book, which was by Osprey, the guys who do the military history. Here are the uniforms and the look. Here's what the Scythians actually looked like. Here are the different formations the Mongols used.
Yeah, you see those a lot in gaming stores that do a lot of miniatures.
You do, and the artwork in this is fantastic. And he comes at this as one of the things that people in alternate history or fantasy buffs and fantasy war game buffs like to do is who would win in a fight.
Yeah. That's what people really want to know.
Exactly. And there was a whole show about this about 10 years ago, Deadliest Warrior or whatnot, that went on the idea of who would win in a fight, a ninja or a Spartan, a pirate or Limp Bizkit. I don't know. Whatnot.
Limp Bizkit was devastating in that show.
They were running out of ideas near the end. But what he says is, so this is a thing that we always like to think about: who would win if you took these storied, famous units or armies or peoples who did not meet in history and threw them together in an actual battle. And what he says is, but in this case, who would win in a fight between the Roman legion and a Hellenistic phalanx? We actually have 6 historical examples of a clash between the Greek phalanx and the Roman legion. And he dissect those 6 battles in chronological order. And it's important to make the distinction between the classical Greek phalanx of the Battle of Marathon and Thermopylae and whatnot, the Peloponnesian War, with the Hellenistic phalanx that was founded by the Macedonians during the conquest of Alexander the Great, and further refined by the successor states of the Antigonids, the Ptolemies, and it's either the Seleucids or the Seleucids. I'm not sure if it's a hard or a soft C.
That's it's a personal matter for the Seleucids or Sids.
Seleucifs.
Yes.
Whatever. Anyway, so the difference is, you look at the old Spartan warrior with the bronze greaves and the giant shield and the 8-foot spear held in one hand. That was the original phalanx. By the time of the successor states, the phalanxes were men with pikes, 16 to 18-foot pikes in some cases. They could break apart, screw in half for carrying. The shield was much smaller and was held on the forearm, strapped to the forearm, but also a strap that went around the neck so they could get both hands on this pike. And this would create a thicket of pikes when they were lowered to where 4, 5, 6 ranks of guys could have their spears pointed toward the enemy. So maybe you get around one spear, and then there's the next spear, 3 feet shorter,
on,
further on, ready to stab you. And they had this sort of hedgehog formation of pikes that would raise up to the ones in the back, who, of course, they have to hold their pikes straight up. But that would create this forest of shafts that served as effective safety against missile fire.
Oh.
Because they could deflect off of the shafts, incoming arrows and slings and whatnot. And which apparently, according to some of the accounts of ancient warfare, the missile fire, particularly of slingstones, was so thick it sounded like hailstones on a roof.
Oh, wow.
As you were advancing. That's how much stuff was coming at you. It's one of the nice flares that Cole writes with as an actual, narrative author of novels. So that was what the Romans were facing in this time. So right around the time of the successor states, the Romans had just finished, or were in the middle of fighting the Punic Wars with Carthage, and were beginning to emerge and into what would become their burgeoning empire. And the main difference is they, in their legions, had these different ranks that were arranged into maniples, which were blocks of soldiers of 3 different varieties, plus skirmishers who would come through the gaps and harry and harass with the different pilum javelins that they'd throw.
Okay.
And there was just the versatility of that was something that the ancient world had not seen before,
right.
and made them, while the Romans, and here's the thing about the Romans, they got their asses kicked in so many battles, but they never admitted defeat. Is the thing. Battles that should have and did crush other civilizations at the time, or cause people, the kings, to say, okay, that's enough. The Romans would just say, screw you, and create another entire army to throw at you and win through attrition after time. So these battles, the first 2 of them, or the first 3 of them, arguably, I think, were victories by the Greeks. The first 2 of them were in the middle of the Pyrrhic Wars there. And in most of these battles, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny. It was horrible, and people died horrible deaths.
But it was long enough ago that we can laugh about it.
They were decided by one side's elephants panicking.
Did both sides have elephants?
In some battles. And what Cole writes about is that these are not the elephants of today. This is a now extinct type of elephant called the Atlas elephant that was native to North Africa and that stood about 8 feet tall. So smaller, easier to control and whatnot, could still, stomp a man into hummus.
Right.
Which is what they often did. Anyway, by the end of it, the Romans were clearly the victors. Not to spoiler, the Romans beat the Greeks.
Yeah.
With their legions, just because they proved more maneuverable. The thing about the Phalanx is it's a deadly defensive formation. It's hard to crack, and it comes at you, and it can come at you like a glacier. But if the ground is bad, or you're able to break it, it can fall. It can collapse. And if you happen to, stampede some elephants that are behind it, that works too.
Less protected from the back.
Less protected from the back. So that was a fun read. What I'm working on now, there's a couple of books. I'm reading Mary Oliver's collection of essays called Upstream, that I had to put down because it's the quality of her prose, because again, she's a poet, like Bly, is so, I'm struggling to find the right word, rich, thick, whatnot, that I couldn't digest it because of just what was going on in personal life at the moment. I want to pick it up again later on. There was this essay specifically about your responsibility as a creative and your relationship with time that I just had to put the book aside to digest fully. I wasn't ready for that level of honesty and insight. So instead, I said, screw it, let's read about all of us dying. So I'm reading now The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wallace-Wells. Okay. Which is a horrifying look at what climate change is actually doing from a whole bunch of different aspects that don't often get the media coverage. Like right now, well, we think one thing that he does that's particularly remarkable and that makes it that much more frightening is he blows up arguments and mindsets towards complacency that kind of settle on us about thinking of this as a distant problem. We're thinking of nature as a thing that is outside of our society rather than that completely surrounds us and whatnot. He also points out that most of the coverage of global warming has to do with sea level rise, which is but one aspect of it. Right there, and like the whole first section of the book is chapters on things that are changing, that are wreaking more and more havoc on the landscape. There is sea level rise, of course, but there's also the unending heat waves. There's the loss of farmland. There is the storms that are coming through. There's the wildfires that's coming through. There's all the feedback loops that are happening with the melting ice in the Arctic. There's the albedo effect, which is the fact that the white of the ice caps reflects a great deal of heat back out to space. As there's less ice, there's less of that, which of course speeds up the whole process. We're seeing the beginnings of the change, or at least the slowing of the great current in the Atlantic, the Gulf Stream.
That's the real one that's going to get us.
That's going to get us. That keeps the temperate zones like the UK and us habitable. There's and there's also I recommend it to everyone. As I'm making my way through it, I'm trying to dissociate the writer part that's going, wow, this is a great scenario for setting in real life. No, this is actually the case, right?
Yeah.
It's making the case that what we used to call like a 500-year storm or natural disasters in the future is just going to be weather. Like it's going to be the new season, is of the wildfire season, the hurricane season, and goes through different, what's going to happen to the different regions, what are the threats to it. And the thing that's weird watching this, like sort of like watching a car crash in slow motion, is sitting where we are in the Pacific Northwest, which is on this continental landmass is one of the only places in the West that has enough water. We don't have to worry about drought as much here. We have to worry about wildfire, of course. We have to worry about mudslides. We have to worry about ocean level rise and the increasing acidification of the oceans that's leading to a death of fisheries, a collapse of fisheries and such. But we're going to be spared from a lot of the horrible stuff that's happening in the developing world, which is bearing an undue percentage of the effects. I don't really know how to describe it, other than it's necessary. Yes, that's it. Exactly.
Currently pre-apocalyptic, but
he talks about how the Paris Accord that was reached. The goal was to slow down, to cap emissions such that we would not exceed 2 degrees warming Celsius by the end of 2100. Right now, 2 degrees is about the minimum we can hope for. With 3 or 4 more likely.
Okay.
So, not an upper. This book, but one that I can't put down.
Yeah, I in doing some of the reading that I've done in my time on global warming, I remember reading an interesting article by a technologist, and God, I wish I could remember the person's name. As you informed me once, we remember information, but not necessarily where we learned the information.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you where I learned either about how Christopher Columbus discovered America or that Christopher Columbus did not discover America. He just poisoned a bunch of natives and killed them. Separate issue. Anyway, the article talked about how, in this technologist's opinion, what would really happen with global warming is things would start to get bad. People would devote resources to researching how to fight it, and then we'd come up with a way to reverse the process. I wasn't sure that I agreed with necessarily the conclusions they were coming up with, but it's interesting to say, look, what we'll do is we'll figure out a way, once there's enough impetus behind this, we'll figure out how to filter carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and start storing it somewhere else until we decide we need it for some other purpose. We'll be able to start pulling, particulates out of the ocean. Like, it's going to get bad, but once it gets bad enough, we'll be able to start making it better. And it was a much more hopeful take on what will happen than I've ever seen on a serious piece on global warming.
And I'm not sure if that isn't also in this book. I haven't gotten to the end of it yet. But Wallace-Wells does discuss some of the technologies that are currently being discussed for fighting global warming. One that shows a lot of promise and a lot of people are excited about is the carbon capture technology.
Yeah.
But the scale of it, in order to even match the emissions right now, would mean we need hundreds of millions of these devices around the world. That he predicts in the future plantations of carbon capture factories, just sucking stuff out of the air to keep us where we are.
Yeah.
One of the more radical solutions, and because it seems easy compared to the idea of we have to stop burning fossil fuels, is sending sulfur into the atmosphere so that the particles reflect more heat out. That might save us a degree or two, but at the same time we're going to be poisoning our skies and increasing acid rain and giving ourselves red sunsets. But it's something that we could actually do that should work.
And make everything smell like rotten eggs.
It's that too, right? I mean, there's no... It's like a devil's bargain. It's like...
There's no...
And the reason they know that is because if it weren't for the air pollution of today, the Earth would already be hotter. Because those particulates that are already in the air...
Are already reflecting
some back. So it's
interesting.
Like, well, do you do this process that will give millions more people cancer, that will increase the number of deaths due to air pollution, but will slow down warming by a couple of degrees.
So our pollution is saving us from the other stupid shit we're doing.
Our pollution is blunting the full impact of the other stupid shit we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a cheery note to end on.
It's a cheery note to end on. So, what are you watching?
Well, speaking of cheery notes, Hannah and I are going through and binging The Walking Dead. We'd watched the first 2 or 3 seasons, I think, and then we just stopped for a while. And then we picked it back up a month, 2 months ago maybe, and we've just been binging pretty hard since then. We are halfway through season 8. Boy, that show doesn't let up sometimes. The very end of season 6, beginning of season 7. Oh, that's traumatic TV.
Yes,
like literally traumatic TV.
Some of those characters were there since the first season.
Yeah. I mean, even not just the characters, just the depiction of brutality and violence, and a lot of times I mean, you know this, in a episode or in a movie, if you have something like really intense, you give the audience a little bit of a break before going back to intense stuff. Maybe there's a lull or something. Like, these episodes don't do that. Like, from about 70% of the way through the end of season 6 all the way to the very last few minutes of the first episode of season 7, it's just unrelenting terror and chaos and fear, and anything can happen, and it doesn't give you that moment to rest.
That's one of the reasons I stopped watching the show. There were a number of shows that it coincided with the end of the year. Shows I'd really been into that I just didn't want to continue anymore. There was a new season, there were new episodes and whatnot, and I just didn't. Maybe it's a matter of tastes have changed, or I felt like I've outgrown it, or I just didn't want that particular input at the moment, that I just kind of quit cold turkey. And Walking Dead was one of them. And I think it was after the season premiere of season 8, the one where, without giving spoilers away, the Alexandria colony strikes back decisively against the Saviors. And at that point I was like, you know what, I'm okay if the series ends here, in my own mind. Because it kind of became disaster porn after a while. It's like and maybe this is just a offshoot of being raised in the West and having the Western mentality, is you shouldn't suffer ultimately for no purpose.
Right.
Enough.
Yeah. And one of the things I actually like about the show is, especially in these later seasons, a lot of the characters are sort of exploring that. They're like, if crap has to happen to me, I want it to be for a reason. Yeah. Like, if I go out, I don't want to go out without someone else benefiting from what I did, from what happened to me.
The interest that I always had in The Walking Dead and in basically zombie apocalypse or apocalyptic stories in general was not the horror of how we treat one another, but the matter of how do you rebuild society? What can be salvaged? How do we do it? That's the thing that I've always found the most interesting in apocalyptic narratives.
I think, honestly, I like both of those aspects, because I think it's a great exploration for, human nature, because suddenly there are no rules. There's no one you're beholden to. Anything bad could happen to you, and you could do anything bad to anyone else.
Yeah.
And there's, no real ultimate authority to say, hey, you shouldn't do that. But then, how do you build a society without starting from a place of having no rules? Because like you say, originally civilizations had to start somewhere. Someone had to gather a group of folk together and start, together or by themselves, making some rules for everyone to follow. So you get to kind of see that organic process. Except that in this case, people have things they can model it on. They've seen other societies. So, what are you digging into right now for shows?
I have been rewatching Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh, I love DS9.
Which was always my favorite Trek series, and it coincided with, and I went to this after finishing Next Generation. I have this idea that I want to watch all of the 90s and 2000s era Treks, because while I loved the franchise, I never saw all of them.
Yeah.
The thing I loved about Next Generation that was so neat was I remember being, I think it was 10 years old, because it came out in 87. And watching some of those early first season episodes on my parents' bed in San Antonio.
Yeah. And
then watching it when we moved to Washington, and watching it through middle school and it ending in high school. It's like this show literally took me from being a child to a teenager.
Yeah.
And then Deep Space Nine took me to being an adult. And while there were some clunker episodes, certainly, it was cool seeing all the pieces that I'd missed on the way through in the era before, DVD and streaming and on-demand stuff. It has been fun watching the older shows and seeing just how beholden they were to the commercial schedule and the anthological nature of episodes. It's like that. Why are you repeating these plot points? You just said that in the last clip. Oh, right. No, there used to be a commercial
because there was somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes of mind-numbing pablum right in the middle. In the middle
there. What I like about Deep Space Nine was what I always wanted from the Trek universe, and that is exploring the other side, exploring the underbelly, the dark bits there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I did not remember from the show. Like, I didn't remember just how shitty a station it was when the
they
Federation
took it over
showed up, And while I always...
Well, and they'd gutted it right before they left.
Exactly. And while I always, got the sense of, okay, it's the Wild West here, I didn't get the political undercurrents that were going on there. That the Federation... the good guys, the Paladin, whatnot, were there as a guest, and they really didn't have nearly as much power as they do in the other Trek shows. And it's been neat watching. I'm going through, nearing the end of season 2 now. When we go to get from original Sisko to classic Sisko. Yeah. And I love Avery Brooks. I love how when he gets pissed off, his diction goes through the roof.
Yes.
And he's doing that shaky fist, but with the voice thing.
Yeah. There. No, his angry Sisko is good.
It's the best. Seeing, watching this time through, I was like, ooh, there's the first mention of the Dominion.
Yep.
In
little
season
things
2.
Like that.
There's another mention of it here 6 episodes later. Oh, the Ferengi rules of acquisition begin to show up. And the surprising darkness of so many of the episodes. It's not a utopian show.
No.
There's the classic episode where Dax, at least, had to go and fulfill a blood oath to the Klingons she made 80 years previous. Yeah. And the resolution, when she gets back to the station, is nothing. It's she gets back, she shares a look with Sisko, the disappointment, and she just goes back to work. Yeah. There. We're not going to talk about it? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Deep Space Nine had... I discussed this with, obviously, a few people because I'm a nerd. But the consensus is that Deep Space Nine was one of the first series to really have kind of an overall arc through all the seasons. Like, this was kind of the story arc we were going for. And so it was innovative in that sense, and it had the best overall story arc and some of the best characterization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it coincided with the time where the DVD market
was kind of
was burgeoning, and people the studios realized, hey, wait a minute, we can actually make our money. We don't have to wait until syndication to make our money. People will pay $50 for a season of this show on DVD or even VHS at that time.
At VHS, it was still a little prohibitive because you could fit, 4 episodes maybe on one VHS tape?
Yeah.
And so you needed, with a 24-episode season, like at least 6 tapes. Yeah. And, if it, sometimes you might need 7 or 8, depending on how many you could actually fit on there. Whereas, and, just the amount of space that would take up, and it would usually cost you more than $50. But then with DVDs, you could have...
It's slim, it's elegant, you can fit a whole bunch of it on, you can skip around. I remember first DVD I watched was at PLU, in which someone had got the collector's edition of Army of Darkness. And they showed that you could skip through chapters like you could skip through tracks on a CD, and that was mind-blowing to me at the time. You don't just have to fast forward through everything or rewind.
No, just hit this button.
Have it take minutes at a time. You just skip. That was amazing. Yeah. Anyway, have enjoyed watching that and filling in all the gaps. I didn't realize how many episodes I had missed. The characterization and such was so strong that you knew what the relationships were as they developed just by picking up an episode here and there.
Yeah, it was quite a few years now when I went back and went through Deep Space Nine. It was actually, Hen and I went through, like you said, we went through Next Gen and then Deep Space Nine. In Next Gen, I was surprised that there was one episode I hadn't seen. Because I used to just binge, I'd watch it all the time. When I was a kid, I'd watch all the reruns. I'd be like, there can't be an episode of this that I haven't seen. There just can't be. And there was one in 7 seasons. Deep Space Nine, I knew I had missed episodes because somewhere along the way, like when I went to college.
Yeah, college happened.
Yeah, and I kind of had trouble keeping up because I just didn't keep up with shows at that time. But I went back and I remember rediscovering it. It was a lot of fun to be like, a Star Trek thing that I remember, but that I don't know enough about that I can't see new stuff happening.
Right.
So I have the familiarity with the characters and what's going on, but I still get new story pieces. So, and then I haven't in a little bit, but a lot of times I'll get really high and then just start watching Deep Space Nine all the way through, and I'm on season 7 now of High Deep Space Nine.
High Deep Space Nine. High.
It's deep, man.
Oh, there's a dead topic.
Yep.
What are you playing?
It's going to come as a surprise, but I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Yeah, okay. I know. I'd played a little bit as a player before, but I was like, look, if I'm going to do this, I need to also know how to DM it. I think I understand the system pretty well, but until I can start incorporating the general rule set. And so for some of the stuff I'm doing right now, I'm trying to stick to what the rules actually say. And then as I understand that, I can start deciding, okay, how much do I really need to stick to this, when I'm gaming with other people? Part of that's going to be hey, what is your group like? Do you want to follow the rules exactly? Is it more important to you to have fun stuff happen than to make sure it happens exactly by the rules? And different people are going to have different opinions on that.
That's true.
So if I can do it by the rules, I'm confident enough that I can fuck around with it. But if I'm just messing around with it and someone's like, no, we really want to follow these rules strictly, and I don't know how to do that, I'm going to have more problems. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, playing as much of it as I can.
For work.
For work. Ostensibly.
Ostensibly.
Yeah. How about you?
I have been playing Magic the Gathering with my son.
Oh, yeah.
He just turned 7, and I've been enjoying it because it's one of the only hobbies I have now that I haven't also turned into some form of a profession. So it can actually just remain a hobby, which is nice.
Yeah.
You know that Magic is now, it's 25 years old. It's just had its silver anniversary, and it just had a core set come out, which is what I got. I got the different monochrome decks for the new core set. And they have these deck builders kits that gives you one of each common from recent sets and stuff, so that's useful. And he really likes it because it's a simple game. He immediately gravitated towards green because big stompy monsters. Why wouldn't you?
Heck yeah!
Right, which is always my favorite color. And I walk him through. Okay, here's you put the land out. You generate the mana. How much does this spell cost? How strong is this monster? If he blocks this monster, how much damage does he do? And Doodle, who is very he's always had a math mind. He loves numbers. He finds that fun. Sometimes when I pick him up from art class, he's up there doing story problems of his own design on the whiteboard. And so
that's great.
Yeah, he really enjoys it. And I play because I don't want to beat him.
Right.
I want him just to really sort of enjoy the game and get to the point where he has fun even if he loses. So I'm playing bad decks against him, right? I'm playing black with no life drain, blue with no counter, red, and I'm not burning anything.
Okay.
I am the Washington Generals of Magic. And so he stomps all over my face with giant dinosaurs and stuff, and he loves it, and which has been really fun. And what we're doing now is I got him from, and it's monochrome right now. So he plays a single green deck. Mm-hmm. He's starting to figure things out. It's like, so can you cast this spell? What's a creature spell you can cast? Well, I've only got 2 forests, but I have this elf that makes green mana too, so I can put this thing down instead, So I still have to hold his hand through most of it, but he's enjoying it. He asks me, "Daddy, you want to play Magic?" I'm like, "Yes, I do, son."
That's awesome.
And the next step is to do the actual tweaking of the deck, so we can look at it and say, okay, so we have these 2 monsters. They both cost the same. This one's a 6/6 trampler, but this one's an 8/8 trampler with another ability. Which one's better?
Okay.
Yes, I know the smaller one is a dinosaur. That doesn't enter into it. Yes, I know he's a dinosaur. Fine, this one wins because he's a dinosaur.
We'll come back.
We'll come back to that.
Oh, that's fun. Have you? Do you have like a ratio of winning losing you're going for? Is it just you always let him win right now, or are you starting to be like?
I try to go
like 80-20 or like.
It's what I've read in parenting books and this goes even to roughhousing and wrestling, is let him win 70% of the time.
Okay.
Or so,
Okay.
And if you do beat them, walk them through how they could have won, or I just got really lucky there. Like I totally top deck his deck when I play.
Okay.
Because he's so easy to distract. It's like, wow, another handful of Llanowar. How lucky are you?
That's fun.
Yeah, that is fun. So we're enjoying that, and I'm looking forward to when I can do some multicolored decks with him, or when he'll want to just pick up a different one and start playing that with me.
Magic. God, I haven't played that in forever.
The thing was curious about is it's Magic, the Gathering. Mm-hmm. Not just Magic, even though we all call it Magic, which always led me to wonder why the Gathering. The Gathering seems like it's a specific type of magic, right? It's like Magic, the Gathering, as opposed to what? Magic, the Journeying?
Magic the Scattering.
Magic the Scattering, which is just, I don't know, it suggests to me just etymologically there should be other forms of magic that haven't come out yet.
Interesting.
I don't know. That's just word nerd stuff.
I mean, I'm sure originally it was just, okay, we have to not just name this thing Magic. There has to be more to it than that.
Might be. Why does it still have that little box at the bottom of the card that says Deckmaster?
Yeah, I got no idea.
Because they designed it in the early 90s and their fan base probably won't let them change it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I guess. I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy. Speaking of asking. Questions.
We have some questions. Let's see what we have here. From Rob. If you were creating an action movie with yourself as the hero, what signature piece of clothing would the character have?
Oh, easy. Bathrobe, wrist compression bracers for carpal tunnel syndrome, and a CPAP mask.
Ooh, that's pretty good. I was going to go with a banana hammock, but I think yours is way better.
We are not getting a movie deal for our superhero franchise.
I don't think so, no. Let's see. From Andy, who prefaces his question with, "Dear God, I think I'm so drunk I have the Vancils." Matt.
I'm sorry, what?
I think I'm so drunk I have the Vancils. I think it's sort of like having the hiccups or the bends.
So, but instead of hiccuping, you develop crippling self-doubt? What is that?
I think it might be something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. But humor about your self-doubt.
Okay, that's...
Matt, how do you meter yourself when you've imbibed a bit too much and know you need to rein in the old mouth parts? Parenthesis, see how I made a jab an actual podcast question, end parenthesis.
So the question is, how do I rein it in if I've drunk too much?
Technically, it's ray in. I think it's supposed to be an N, but it's an H. So maybe he did actually imbibe a little bit before.
Let's pretend I didn't transcribe that and blame it on Andy there.
Oh, okay.
So how do you meter yourself when you've imbibed a bit too much and know you need to rein in the old mouth parts? Easy. I shut up.
Okay.
Which is easy for me, being an introvert. Yeah. I always want to disappear into a corner. So
Bam.
Yeah,
done, son.
Done. I guess.
Scratch it off.
Case of the Vancils?
Yeah, it's a real thing, apparently. From Moritz, what Hogwarts houses were both of you sorted to on Pottermore? Are you happy with the choices of the hat?
I was Ravenclaw.
As was I, a Ravenclaw. Yeah, so, because, look, I'd like to think I was a Gryffindor, but I'm not that brave.
I'm not interested in Gryffindor.
I'm not backstabby, so I'm not a Slytherin. And fuck Hufflepuff. What is Hufflepuff? Like, if you want to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, sure, Hufflepuff is great for you. Otherwise, what? You're friendly? Like, come on. What is that?
I saw a meme on Tumblr that said, Godric Gryffindor with the other leaders or the founders of Hogwarts. It's like, so, to begin with, let's agree that children fall into one of 4 categories: brave, smart, evil, and miscellaneous.
And maybe they have something else going for them we don't see yet.
Not really. Yeah.
So yeah, we were both Ravenclaws. I'm happy.
Ravenclaws.
I think Ravenclaw was the one I wanted.
I was always curious about Slytherin, too.
Yeah?
They seem like they get stuff done.
Yeah, I don't think as a personality, though.
No, not
I'm
as a personality.
Slytherin like at all.
No.
So, all right, well, let's move on. That one was easy. From Dan, also about wizarding and hats. Is there a pattern for what style of hats that wizards get in Fartherall, e.g., Robrank, School of Magic specialty, etc.?
Yes. They typically have for students at the Wizardium, they have the smaller sort of conical cap if they're just at school. They have the traveling sort of wizard's hat that Perf has to keep off the rain and whatnot. And once they graduate, or hit black robe or whatever, you can wear whatever hat you want.
Okay. So you are not required to wear a hat once you're a black robe, but below that it's required or highly encouraged?
It's part of the uniform.
Okay.
Yeah, it's...
All right.
Yes.
There we go. And lastly, from Rob, there seem to be 2 schools of writers. Those who wait for inspiration to hit and then go nuts with it, and those who work it like a 9-to-5 job. Are you one, the other, a little bit of both, or something completely different, which I will call a Hufflepuff?
Evil, brave, smart, and other. It's a bit of both. It's like inspiration is wonderful, but it is fickle. It can abandon you when you're in the middle of it. It can come at strange points, and what I've learned to do is, when inspiration strikes, if I'm not in front of the computer, email the notes to yourself or jot them down on scratch paper or whatever, because you will forget them otherwise. And you can't rely on inspiration. There's times you really have to rely on craft and discipline, and that is the 9-to-5. Rarely it's a 9-to-5. With me, often it's like a 6-to-2 sort of thing. But with a couple of young kids at home and just the challenges of the last 3 months, I do it when I can. Is really what it comes down to. You got to get your page count. Your page count or your words. I try to do. On a day when I shouldn't have time to write, I try to get 1,000 words done. On a day when I do have time to write, I aim for 3.
Okay.
And because that stacks up after a while. I mean, if you do that every day of the week, you got a 20,000 word week. That's a quarter of a novel manuscript there. And of course, that's not taking in time for revisions and hard copy edits.
Right.
But you got to get it done. And frankly, sometimes just the act of sitting down and writing out crap helps activate the inspiration. Sometimes you're in the middle of it, and that's what it takes. But sitting
the inspiration comes from whatever crap you like. This is crap, but it made me think of something that's not crap.
And that's part of the discipline is understanding that yes, this phase of the draft is going to be crap. I'm not happy with it. Each sentence is beginning the same. The style seems like it's consistent throughout. I'm using the same subject verb object subject verb object. I'm not playing with that. I'm using the same words over and over again. I'm not making as much sense. The paragraphs aren't concluding the way I want them to. But that's fine. Anne Lamott says that the first draft is all about putting the sand in the sandbox so you can make castles later.
Okay.
Right on. I guess that answers the question.
Well, that concludes our topics and questions for this episode of Coddiwomple. Do you have anything you would like to sign off with, Matt?
Not really, no.
All right. I don't know that I have anything terribly exciting, except if you are interested in your personal DM, the functional title, or in the future episodes of Dungeons and Flagons, stay tuned. I will tell you more about them as information develops.
We will see you here in 1 month's time?
In 1 month, give or take a few days.
This was not an impressive sign-off.
Bye-bye.
Which button is it?
The